I smiled at my own wedding. I smiled through the entire thing. I smiled when my mother called it intimate. I smiled when my aunt said it was so perfectly simple, just like Elena. I smiled when I overheard my father tell someone at the reception that we had kept things modest, the way you'd describe a sensible car or a practical pair of shoes. I smiled because that is what I had been trained to do my entire life inside my family. Adjust, accommodate, shrink, smile. Make everyone comfortable with whatever they decided to give you, and be grateful it was anything at all. My name is Elena Vasquez. I am 33 years old. I am a woman who spent 3 decades being so easy to overlook that the people who were supposed to love me the most got very comfortable doing exactly that. And I am done. I am so completely and permanently done. But before I tell you where I am now, I need to take you back to the exact moment I found out. Because there was a moment, a specific, physical, time-stamped moment where the thing I had felt in my bones for years stopped being a feeling and became a fact. And that moment happened at my sister's wedding. While I was standing in a bathroom stool, in my bridesmaid dress, holding my phone, with tears dripping off my chin onto the screen. Stay with me. I promise you this story goes somewhere that will make your chest ache and your blood boil and your fist pump the air all at once. Just stay with me. Let me paint you a picture of the Vasquez household. From the outside, it was a beautiful picture. Warm home, good neighborhood, parents who went to church on Sundays, and hosted Thanksgiving every year, and remembered everyone's birthdays, and showed up to things. They were good people. I want to say that clearly, before anything else. My parents were not monsters. They were not cruel. They did not sit in dark rooms calculating how to make one daughter feel less than the other. They were just human. Human in the specific way. That means they had a favorite, and never once examined what that cost the other one. My sister Sophia is 4 years younger than me, and Sophia, God, Sophia is something. She walks into a room, and people reorganize themselves around her without realizing they're doing it. She has this laugh that makes strangers turn around to find where it came from. She cries at commercials and somehow makes it look elegant. She is the kind of woman that other women want to be friends with immediately, and men want to protect, and parents want to show off. My parents showed her off constantly. From the time she could walk, Sophia was the story my family told about themselves. Look at Sophia. Isn't she something? Did you see what Sophia did? I was not the ugly one. I was not the stupid one. I was not the difficult one. I was just the one they told a different story about. The story they told about me was, Elena is so capable. Elena handles everything. Elena doesn't need much. Elena has always been the responsible one. They said it like it was a compliment. Every single time. And every single time I heard it, I smiled and said thank you, and went home and sat alone with the specific, quiet grief of a person who has just been described as a convenience. I was not a daughter to them. I was infrastructure. Reliable, sturdy, load-bearing, the kind of thing you only notice when it's gone. Here is what the story of Elena and Sophia looks like in actual documented years. When Sophia wanted dance classes, at age 9, my parents drove her 40 minutes each way, 3 times a week, for 6 years, without a single audible complaint. When I wanted art classes at age 10, my mother said they were a bit expensive right now, and suggested I use the supplies we already had at home. We had a box of dried out markers, and 3 coloured pencils. I taught myself to draw, anyway, alone, at the kitchen table at night, after homework. My parents called this self-motivation. When Sophia got her license at 16, there was a used car in the driveway with a ribbon on it the next morning. When I got my license at 16, I was told I could use the family car on weekends when nobody else needed it. I saved for 2 years and bought my own car at 18. My father said, "See, that's the thing about Elena. She just figures it out." When Sophia got into college, there was a family dinner at a restaurant, presents on the table, champagne for my parents, a speech from my father that made my mother cry. When I got into the same college 2 years later, my mother hugged me in the kitchen and said, "We are so proud of you, honey. We always knew you would." Then she asked me to help with dinner. I helped with dinner. I told myself it was fine. I was 17 years old, and I had already been telling myself that, for so long, it had stopped feeling like a lie and started feeling like just the weather, just the way things were. Just Elena. I need to tell you about the years between college and the wedding, because this is where the picture gets more complicated and more painful and more real. I graduated. I built a career in marketing that I was genuinely good at. I had an apartment that I decorated slowly and carefully over 3 years until it looked exactly like the inside of my head, feels warm, considered, a little unconventional, very much mine. I had good friends, a therapist I adored named Dr. Amara, who had the specific gift of asking one question that undid 15 years of careful construction, a morning routine I loved, a life that was genuinely, honestly, good. And I had Marcus. Marcus came into my life at 30 through a completely unremarkable set of circumstances, a mutual friend's birthday dinner, a long conversation about nothing important that somehow lasted 4 hours, a walk home in the cold where neither of us suggested stopping. He was an architect, quiet in the way that means he is always thinking, the kind of man who fixes things before you ask him to because he noticed they were broken, who remembers not just what you said, but why you said it. On our second anniversary, he took me to the same restaurant where we'd had that first long dinner, and he reached across the table and took both of my hands and said, "Elena, you are the most fully realized person I have ever met. I want to spend every year watching you become more of yourself. Will you marry me?" I cried so hard, I couldn't answer for almost a full minute. He waited. He has always known how to wait for me. I said yes. And that night, I called my mother, and she cried and said all the right things, and I let the hope back in. The hope I had been trying to retire for years. I let it back in. Sophia got engaged 8 months before me. Her fiancé was a man named Theo. Tall, charming, came from a family with a name that meant something in this city. My parents loved him immediately and loudly, and my mother started planning the wedding approximately 48 hours after the proposal. I watched the whole thing from my regular position, slightly behind, slightly to the side, smiling. The engagement party was at my parents' house, catered, 100 people. My mother had hired someone to do the flowers. My father gave a speech that lasted 12 minutes and mentioned Sophia 17 times, and me once, briefly, in the context of thanking the family. I counted. I know that sounds petty. Counting mentions at your sister's engagement party is not a flattering thing to admit, but when you have spent 30 years being the background of someone else's story, you develop certain habits, certain quiet ways of measuring where you stand. 17 and 1. I drove home and I told Marcus about it. He listened. He didn't minimize it. He didn't tell me I was overreacting. He said, "I see it too. I've seen it since the first family dinner I came to." I loved him even more for that. Sophia's wedding was in September. I was maid of honor. Of course I was maid of honor. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who could be trusted to hold everything together while also holding everyone's feelings and also looking appropriate in a photo. Infrastructure. The venue was a 5-star hotel that had been partially closed for private events. The ballroom had been transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a film. Crystal everywhere. Flowers on every surface. A string quartet for the ceremony and a 12-piece band for the reception. 280 guests. A menu that had been tasted and revised 3 times. A cake that cost more than my first car. It was extraordinary. Genuinely extraordinary. And I was happy for Sophia. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. I was genuinely, completely happy for my sister that day. She was beautiful and radiant, and Theo looked at her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. And the moment they exchanged vows was real and true, and I cried actual tears standing up there next to her. My complicated feelings about my family had nothing to do with my love for Sophia. Those two things lived in completely separate rooms inside me. But here is where the moment happened, the moment that changed everything. It was during the cocktail hour. I had stepped away to use the bathroom, the kind of grand hotel bathroom, with marble floors and little gold soap dishes and mirrors that go from floor to ceiling. I was washing my hands when my mother's friend Diane came in. Diane is one of those women who has known your mother since before you were born, and therefore feels entitled to treat you with a familiarity that you have never actually earned with her. She saw me in the mirror, and she lit up, and she said, "Elena, everything is just magnificent. Your parents have truly outdone themselves." I said they really have. She said I heard they went all out. Marcia told me the whole budget. I nearly fell off my chair, and then she stopped herself, and did that thing people do when they realize they have said something they shouldn't have. That half-second recalibration, and she said, "Well, anyway, it is just stunning." I looked at her in the mirror. I said, "What was the number, Diane?" She laughed nervously. I said, "Please, I'm her sister. I'll find out eventually." She hesitated for one more second. Then she said, "I think Marcia said somewhere around 150,000, give or take." And then she said something about the flowers and left. I stood at that marble sink. I looked at myself in that floor-to-ceiling mirror, and I thought about the envelope my parents had given Marcus and me 4 months earlier. The envelope my mother had handed across the kitchen table with folded hands and a careful smile after the speech about things being stretched and keeping it simple. I had not opened it at the table. I had opened it in the car. $3,000. I pulled my phone out from inside my dress. I opened the calculator. $150,000 minus $3,000. $147,000. I stared at that number, and something in me, something that had been quietly fracturing for 30 years, finally, completely, silently broke. I went into the nearest stool. I sat down on the closed lid, and I put my face in my hands. And I cried in a way I had never let myself cry before. Not delicate tears, not the kind you can blink back and recover from in 90 seconds. The ugly kind. The kind that comes from somewhere so deep and so old that when it finally comes out, your whole body shakes with the force of something that has been held too long in a space too small. I cried for the choir I didn't join. I cried for the art classes I couldn't take. I cried for every family dinner where Sophia got a speech and I got asked to help with the dishes. I cried for the car with the ribbon. I cried for every time I was called capable and reliable and self-sufficient and easy, when what I actually was, what I had always actually been, was lonely, profoundly, quietly, invisibly lonely. I cried for 17 minutes in a marble bathroom stall at my sister's $150,000 wedding. Then I fixed my face. I straightened my dress. I walked back out into that ballroom, and I smiled, because that was what I did. That was what I had always done. But something was different now, because now I had a number, and a number is not a feeling you can argue yourself out of. A number just sits there, patient and permanent and completely unmovable. $147,000. I carried it back into that ballroom like a stone in my chest, and I decided, quietly, completely, without telling a single person, that I was done being simple. I planned my wedding the way I had done everything in my life, alone, resourcefully, with a level of competence that would have impressed people if anyone had been paying close enough attention to notice. Marcus and I had $30,000 of our own money, plus the $3,000 from my parents. $33,000 total. And I want to tell you what we built with that, because I need you to understand something before the next part of this story. What we built was not a consolation prize. It was not a brave face on a disappointing situation. It was not a woman making the best of a bad hand. It was exactly what we wanted. We found a renovated greenhouse venue on the edge of the city. Glass ceilings, living walls, the kind of space that looks like someone had a dream and built it. It held 95 guests, every single one of them a person we had actively chosen, not one obligatory invite, not one seat filled out of family politics or social duty. I designed every visual element myself: invitations, signage, menus, table numbers, all of it cohesive, all of it beautiful, all of it mine in a way that felt like signing my name in large letters on something I was proud of. My dress was $900 from a designer sample sale. One alteration. When I put it on for the final fitting, I stood in that mirror and I thought, yes, that is the woman I want to be today. Our photographer was a 26-year-old who had been shooting weddings for 3 years and whose work made me genuinely catch my breath when I found her online. She shot our wedding like a film. Every photo looks like a still from a movie I would watch twice. The food was extraordinary. The dancing didn't stop. Marcus cried 3 separate times during the ceremony. Actual, undone, not trying to hide it tears. And when we had our first dance, he held my face in his hands for a moment before we started moving, and he said quietly, "You are everything, Elena, everything." It was the most beautiful day of my life. I mean that with my entire chest. But here is what was also true. My mother spent the reception telling every relative within earshot that Marcus and I had chosen something intimate. My father told his brother we had gone with something understated. My aunt Rosaria, who has never once in her life read a room correctly, said loudly at the dinner table that Elena had always been the simple one, even as a little girl, never needed anything grand, just like her parents always said. And I watched my mother nod. I watched her actually nod, like this was an accurate and flattering description of her daughter. Like simple was something she was proud of producing. And Marcus's hand found mine under the table, and he squeezed it once, and I knew that he knew. And I made a decision. Not tonight. This was our night. But soon I was going to stop being simple. The conversation happened 6 weeks after the wedding. Not at a family dinner. Not in a dramatic public setting. In my parents' living room on a Sunday afternoon. Just me. No Marcus. No Sophia. No audience. Just Elena and her parents, and 33 years of things that had been said sideways instead of straight. I sat down. My mother brought tea. My father sat in his chair. And I said, I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to just listen until I'm finished. Can you do that? They looked at each other. My father said, of course. I said, I know what you spent on Sophia's wedding. The room changed temperature immediately. My mother started to speak. I said, I asked you to listen first. She closed her mouth. I said, $150,000. And you gave me $3,000. And told me to keep it simple. And I did. I kept it simple. I kept myself simple my whole life. Because that is what you taught me to do. Not intentionally. I know it wasn't intentional. But here is what happened. You had a daughter who was easy, and a daughter who needed more. And you spent 30 years pouring everything into the one who asked loudly, and assuming the one who never asked was fine. I kept my voice completely level. I said I was not fine. I am telling you right now that I was not fine. I was lonely in this family, for as long as I can remember. Not unloved. Lonely. There is a difference. You can love someone from a distance, and they will feel both the love and the distance. And the distance will do its own damage, regardless of the love. My mother had tears running down her face. My father was completely still. I said, I don't want an apology that makes you feel better. I don't want a conversation that ends with everyone hugging and nothing changing. I want you to actually hear what I am saying. I want you to sit with it. And then, I want to talk about whether we can build something different. Because I am not interested in walking away from this family. But I'm also not willing to keep pretending that everything was equal, when we all know it wasn't. I picked up my tea. My hands were completely steady. I had been shaking in the car on the way over. But here, saying the real thing out loud to the people who needed to hear it, I was completely still. "My father," said Elena. I looked at him. He said, "I don't know how to tell you how sorry I am, without it sounding like it isn't enough, because I know it isn't enough. But I am going to say it anyway. I am sorry. You deserved more. From both of us. For a long time. And we didn't see it. And I think part of us didn't want to see it, because seeing it meant admitting something about ourselves that was very hard to face. But I see it now. I see it clearly." My mother said, "Me too. I see it too. And I am sorry, Elena. I am so deeply sorry." I nodded. I said, "Okay. That's where we start." Here is what happened next. 6 months after that conversation, Sophia called me. She had found out. Not from me. Not from my parents. From Theo's mother. Apparently at a family dinner at Theo's parents' house, the topic of wedding costs had come up the way it does, in rooms full of people who have money and aren't self-conscious about discussing it. And Theo's mother had mentioned what my parents had spent on Sophia's wedding, and then made an offhand comment about how lovely my wedding had been, but of course it was on quite a different scale. And Sophia had come home that night and gone through 4 years of their joint finances and called my mother and asked her directly. My mother told her the truth. Sophia called me at 11 o'clock at night. She said, "Lena, tell me everything." And I did. I told her all of it. The bathroom stall, the calculator, the stone in my chest, the 6 weeks of carrying it alone, all of it. Sophia was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I'm going to be sick." She said, "I need you to know I had no idea. I need you to know that if I had known." I said, "I know, Sophia. I know you didn't know." She said, "This is not okay. What they did to you is not okay. And I am going to tell them that." I said I already did. She said then, "I am going to tell them again." What Sophia did next is the part of this story that people don't expect. She called my parents, and she told them that until they made it genuinely right, not with words, with action, she would not be bringing her future children to family dinners, where one aunt was treated as the afterthought. She said, "I love you both, but Elena is my sister, and if you want to be in my family's life going forward, then she needs to be in it too, fully, not as the capable, reliable, simple one, as your daughter, your actual daughter, the same as me." My mother called me crying afterward. My father showed up at my apartment 2 days later, without calling first. He knocked on the door, and when I opened it, he was standing there, holding absolutely nothing, and looking like a man who had driven 40 minutes to say something he had been practicing in the car the whole way and had still not found the right words for. He said, "Can I come in?" I said yes. He sat at my kitchen table. He said, "I have been going through everything in my head. Every year. I have been going back through your whole life, trying to find every moment where I got it wrong. And there are so many, Elena. There are so many moments. And I can't fix them. I know I can't fix them." He reached into his jacket. He put an envelope on the table. I looked at it. He said, "It is not about the wedding. The wedding is done, and it was beautiful. This is about all of it. The whole sum of what we owe you." I opened the envelope. A check. $147,000. The exact difference. Every single dollar. I looked at my father. He said, "Your mother and I have also started seeing someone. A therapist. Because we want to understand how we let this happen, so that we never do it again. To you. To our grandchildren someday. To anyone. He said you deserve to be seen your whole life. And we looked right at you, and somehow kept missing you. And I don't have a good explanation for that. I just have a very deep apology and a commitment to do better for whatever time we have left." I sat at my kitchen table with that check in my hands for a long time. Then I looked at my father, this man. This imperfect, deeply human man who had somehow coached a sport he didn't know for 3 years for my sister, and had never once shown up to a single thing for me, and was sitting here now, trying to find a way to say the size of that, with a number. And I said, "Dad, thank you. This matters. But what matters more is the knock on the door, the showing up without a plan, the sitting here when you didn't know what to say. That is what I needed my whole life. Just show up, even when you don't know what to say. Just show up." He nodded. He pressed his hand over mine on the table. We sat there for a while. Just that. Here is where I am now. The check is in an investment account. Marcus and I decided together to let it grow and decide later what it becomes. There is no rush. The money was never really the point. My parents and I are building something we have never had before, a relationship with actual honesty in it. My mother calls me now with real questions, not "How are you?" Real ones. How is the project you were worried about? How did the dinner with Marcus's family go? Did you ever finish the painting you mentioned 3 months ago? She remembers things. She asks follow-ups. It is new and sometimes clumsy, and occasionally we slip back into old patterns and have to correct course. But it is real. And real, even when it is imperfect, is worth so much more than polished and hollow. Sophia and I are closer than we have ever been in our lives. We talk every week, long conversations that go in every direction. We have compared childhoods with an honesty that has been sometimes painful and sometimes darkly funny and always clarifying. She told me something recently that I have been thinking about ever since. She said, "I think growing up, I always felt slightly guilty for having so much, and I never understood why, and now I understand. It was because somewhere inside me, I always knew the scale was off. I just didn't know who was paying for my side of it. You were," I told her. "Not financially, but you were. I want to end this the way I began it, with a wedding, with a woman in a greenhouse, with glass ceilings and living walls, and 95 people who were there because they were wanted there, with a photographer who shot everything like it was a film, with a man who cried 3 times and held her face before the first dance and said, 'You are everything,' with a mother in the back of the room saying intimate, and a father saying understated, and an aunt saying simple, and a woman in the middle of all of it, who had spent 33 years being told she was the simple one, deciding for the first and final time. That simple was never what she was. Simple was just what happened to a woman who was never given room to be anything else. I am not simple. I am not easy. I am not fine. I am Elena Vasquez, and I take up exactly as much space as I deserve, which is all of it, every single inch. I want to be honest with you about something before you go. I write these stories because I know there is someone watching this right now who needed to hear it. Not as entertainment, as permission. Permission to stop being the easy one. Permission to stop making yourself small so everyone else can feel comfortable. Permission to say out loud, this was not equal, and it was not okay, and I am allowed to say so. If Elena's story hit you somewhere deep, if you found yourself nodding at the choir she couldn't join, or the car with the ribbon, or the word simple, said one too many times, then this story was for you. And I want you to do one thing before you leave this video. Drop a comment below and just say, "I see you, Elena." Because somewhere, someone reading these comments is going to need to see that they are not alone in this. And if this story moved, you share it. Send it to the person in your life who has always been the easy one and never been told that their quiet carrying was seen. Because it is seen. I see it. And if you want more stories like this, the kind that stop you mid-scroll and sit with you for days, subscribe. Because I put everything I have into every single one of these, and I am not done telling the stories that matter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end. You didn't have to, and you did anyway. That means everything.